So good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something we do every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Have a discussion about where smart buildings is headed. Panelists are listed on mondaylive.org. Just as a reminder, the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. Please do post questions and comments on the Q&A and chat on Zoom, and complete the survey at the end if you wouldn't mind. And this deck that has some links and stuff from us is also available on mondaylive.org. So head over there if you see anything interesting. Just as a reminder, the focus this month is on digital twin. And the agenda for today, we'll have a general chit chat as we normally do, and then dive into digital twin. We have a couple of guests, Dan and Steve. And the general question that we really want to ask is, what is it, and why is it important to buildings? So hopefully we can have some good conversations here. Ken is talking about adaptation, which is April, and he's also talking, he's gone way beyond digital twin. He's talking about digital triplets, so we'll come back to that in a minute. John Petsy talking about leasing, and this is green lease that we touched on last week, and a hole on one. Can't wait to hear that. Mark talking about climate impact and offices in Australia, and Anna talking about digital twin. I think he is the first in the universe to mention digital twin, right, Anno?
At least the universe.
At least the universe. And I saw this, I know this has been sort of brewing, but we talked about repurposing buildings, so some interesting pictures of a Macy's that's been turned into a school. What do you know? Yeah, and digital twins. So that's kind of there to kick us off. Ken, where are you, Ken? There you are. Ken, talk about what you're focused on this month.
Okay, well, our April issue went on April Fool's Day to fool you all, and it's on adaptation. And we've had a good response. Also had a good response in folks writing articles and telling us about their various views on adaptation. One of the interesting ones was Nicholas, who came at us with, is there a need for digital triplets and quadruplets and other siblings? It's an interesting article. He talks a little bit about feeding back what we know is going to happen in the future back into the digital twin model. So we have the operating twin, and then we have the twin of the operating, and now we have sort of a predicted twin, and that sort of leads to other twin identities, I guess. So that's kind of an interesting one. We had a little chit chat on, we got published on Easter Sunday with Control Talk, and we talked about our issue and all of the articles on there, and a little bit more about digital twin, and some of the stuff that some of the IT folks have been doing that have been kind of around our industry for a while. It's interesting that some of these IT folks that are we're calling the new startups are they've actually been at this for 5 years as well, trying to figure out how to make all of this stuff come together. And that's Don Casper has been. We got involved with them back in Connectivity Week, Anto and I, and they were doing probably some of the first twin stuff, and they were doing artificial intelligence, and they basically built off of some of the analytics that were being used for testing jet engines and stuff, and started to apply that to, I believe it was the campus at Santa Barbara. Anyway, lots of things on our April issue. Take a look, okay. And we're also, our May theme will evolve to this digital triplets. And the other thing we're seeing is what we're calling the new wireless wave. And what's happening is we're seeing a different kind of wireless products starting to roll out and combined with IT services and being sold as a service. So
Great.
it'll be an interesting issue as well.
Great. Thanks, Ken. John?
Yeah, two articles that fit with themes we've been talking about. We've been talking about sustainability. We mentioned and talked a little bit about green leases. It was interesting. This article came out right after we got done with our month, but it's from the Institute for Market Transformation, which is trying to drive policy. And, it's a whole article about how to structure green leases, how they work. So I thought that would be interesting for our audience. The other thing we talked about is how facilities may be repurposed. And there's kind of an intersection here. I read separately, and I don't have it on the slide, that the hottest market segment commercially is for logistics centers, warehouses, those types of things. And this article was, converting, in this case, a golf course, but other facilities to meet this need for additional industrial style space, mainly around warehousing and logistics from what I'm seeing in the articles.
Great. Thank you. Mark?
Two that caught my attention this past week was one, a company called Watershed launched a tool that assesses workforce climate impact as the companies and offices reopen. It's a tool, and the formula, the tool, or whatever, basically can figure out what the climate impact is for the employees being within the office, taking into account their commute back and forth, and the size of the company, travel, and so forth and so on. First I've ever seen anything like this. And again, since we've talked about climate before in ESD, thought it was appropriate. Second one is, I think this is more of a wishful one. Yes, there's light at the end of the tunnel. And this one is all about the post-pandemic is already in effect in down under in Australia, that people are returning to work. And it's just a good thing. The picture is colleagues drinking beer. So that kind of gives us all hope at some point in time. But lastly, what was interesting is when you go in, do you shake hands? Do you still do elbow bumps? Do you do feet bumps, or whatever the case is? Nobody seems to know. So anyway, there's light at the end of the tunnel, gang.
Great.
I didn't let the pandemic stop me from drinking beer, just for the record.
So say all of us. Anno?
Just two interesting articles. One, of course, self-grandization. An article that Therese and I wrote almost 4 years ago on digital twins and where we thought the market was going. It still stands up the test of time, in my belief, mainly because Therese did the good work on that one. But the other one that's interesting is actually from the industrial space, which was some of the discussions we're having on Wednesday, right? That the industrial guys have led the digital twin initiative for quite a lot longer. And there's a lot to be gained and understood about what the industrial guys are using from a digital twin. They're a lot more mature in the space at the moment. And it's worth having a read of some of the things that the industrial guys are doing to see how we can leverage, some of the concepts coming out of those guys.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have any new things that they didn't put up on a slide?
Yeah, I wanted to just a couple anecdotal comments. One is having to do. I was talking to a colleague about the COVID, the impact of COVID, and getting shots. And one of the colleagues has a wife who's a doctor, and interesting report is no treatment for flu this year. Okay, so she's seen no one coming in testing positive for flu and so it had to do with the question of when we get rid of the masks. And it may be, it's just conjecture, but it may be that the effect of the masks has been to really minimize the spread of flu this season. So just thought I'd throw that out. And then secondly, another colleague who works, a partner of ours who does work up in Canada, was saying that they're now having a third wave of cases up there, and they've been slower than the US to get the vaccines rolled out. And the impact on his business is he's seeing, although there's interest in what they're doing, there's no trigger pulling because there's still this issue with the building owners not being uncertain. You know, are people coming back to work, and so on. So they're just not acting as a result of the increased, well, not the increased, but the continued issue with the cases going on. So.
Interesting fun fact, Steve, you're right about the mask, but I read a similar article and they actually attributed it to the increase in hand washing by people.
Okay. Yeah. So what is it, the masks, or is it we're washing our hands, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So some of these things will continue. Anybody else want anything else, or we jump into digital twins?
And so I threw an article link into the chat box. I guess I missed my window. It was published by Forbes at the end of February, right up Steve's alley, talking about cyber digital twins and how that's going to be utilized, you know, for development, testing, analysis, IP protection, and vendor management. So interesting.
In the supply chain, presumably, on the vendor management.
Yep.
Cool.
Oh.
All right, great. So let us dive into digital twins. So we have two guests that I'm going to bring on as panelists. Dan Isaacs, I find him there, and Steve Holzer. Guys, come and join us on stage. And I am going to put up Holzer time as Steve's Holzer's thing. That's why he has that on his background. Hey, Steve. So I'm going to put up some slides that Dan put together, and so he can start. Dan is the CTO of the Digital Twin Consortium. It's an organization that my company Patty is involved with, and Dan's going to give a brief overview of what the DTC is all about and its objectives specifically to do with buildings. So here I'm going to put up the slides, and Dan, welcome. All yours. And
everybody.
we can't hear you.
All right, hold on.
Okay, now we can. Off you go. Oh, good.
I'm just trying to get to the right screen. Doesn't want to move me down. All right. Anyway, hello, everybody. My name is Dan Isaacs. Whoops. Now the screen's disappeared. Anto, was that your side?
Oh, that was me. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So my name is Dan Isaacs. I am the CTO, the technical director for the Digital Twin Consortium. I joined 2 weeks after it was originally formed. We have Steve Holzer here, raising his hand. All right. I always like to lead off whenever I see Steve, but it's his logo. I always say it's Holzer time, and now it is Holzer time coming on. So thank you for your support on this one, Steve. We were founded, about 10 months ago, and you can see here the founding companies, Microsoft, GE Digital, we had Northrop Grumman, we had Dell Technologies, Autodesk, Ansys, Bentley came on, and also Lend-Lease. And Lend-Lease is the actual, they chair, the CEO of the digital transformation, Bill Root, chairs the steering committee for the Digital Twin Consortium. And I think it was, as was just stated a little bit earlier, where manufacturing has been leading digital twin. I would say it's also aerospace and defense and automotive right behind it. The goal is really to bring the digital twin discipline, methodology, technique, technologies into to the developers and the construction, and be able to recognize the efficiencies and the optimizations and the savings that the other industries have been. So you can see here we had about 55 members roughly in terms of groundbreakers that had joined. We are now approaching over 270 members now. So again, a very strong testament in terms of the recognition and understanding and acceptance of what digital twins and digital twin enabling technology can provide. Next slide. So the structure of the consortium is really focused more towards the domains, where you can see here the domains listed at the bottom: aerospace, defense, infrastructure, manufacturing, natural resources, healthcare, and life sciences. We'll talk a little bit more about these going forward. But we also have our horizontal working group, and that is looking at, we call them the 3T, the technology, the terminology, and the taxonomy. And that's divided into specific subgroups from that horizontal perspective, where you could imagine security is across every one of these domains. Trustworthiness, whether it's reliability, whether it's resiliency, whether, especially in healthcare and life science, whether it's the privacy, and then the data governance, all across those. So really in those horizontal domains. And then we have key, so we have a common language or a common vernacular as we're discussing this between the different working groups within the consortium, is being able to focus on that terminology and even the taxonomy, understand about the triplets, the digital triplets now. That's interesting points. And you can see some of the examples that we'll be talking about really, and this is very well aligned in terms of the approach that Dr. Michael Greaves, who was the father of the concept of digital twin, again, coming out of the manufacturing space. He's world-renowned in terms of PLM and he is the chief scientist at Florida Institute of Technology. Also a member of the Digital Twin Consortium, another testament to the fact of the work and the collaboration, the opportunities within this consortium. But looking at this across the board in terms of the overall sort of a blueprint or a framework to provide a lens to look at each one of the different reference implementations coming out of the different working groups and the different domains. Also key important, I want to point out the platform stack, which also includes open source, as well as what we're calling our open central collaboration hub that we're going to be releasing here towards the end of the month. So that's going to allow non-members to also participate and submit projects for being able to work and drive that collaboration further. One of our members basically states that the Digital Twin Consortium has an unfair advantage in terms of the collective knowledge base and expertise of practitioners, as well as users, developers, implementers of digital twin and enabling digital twin technology. And I would absolutely agree with that. And the key point is this consortium is member driven. So let's take a little bit further look. We have our marketing and thought leadership to bring out all the technology, the thought leadership, the innovations through our groups as well. So that's the structure overall of the consortium. I already talked a little bit about this in terms of the way the horizontal, the 3T working group is structured. So you can see here the different areas. There's also a focus towards the business maturity model. One of the popular analysts, Gartner, has coined the term digital twin of organizations to be able to ensure the efficiency and the productivity of the organizations using a digital twin to optimize that information flow across the entire organization and work to eliminate silos. Okay, next slide. So vertical working groups, as I talked about with manufacturing, aerospace and defense, even within the healthcare and life science, manufacturing not just focused on the assets themselves, such as predictive condition monitoring, predictive maintenance, these types of things, but also looking at it from a supply chain management perspective and understanding the value and the advantages digital twin and digital twin enabling technology provides. Aerospace and defense, not only the assets themselves again, such as the latest word about the next generation air defense system that came out, where they used a digital twin and it dramatically reduced cost, dramatically beat the schedule that was originally projected. And then on top of that, when they flew their first prototype, the first actual system, it flew and operated flawlessly. So that's caused a significant transformation in the aerospace and defense, especially within the DoD and how they go forward on projects. And you can see this replicated across all the different areas, whether it's the Air Force, whether it's the Navy, all the different aspects that they're looking at or ground. And then healthcare and life science, one of the common areas that we're looking at, the members is how do we eliminate the data silos? How do we eliminate the silos actually and communication silos that exist between what we've seen with big pharma and the healthcare and the healthcare providers? And a perfect example of that is what we're going through with the pandemics. You just heard there's a shortage of vaccines in many of the key areas where with the proper planning, with the understanding, and again, understanding of the knowledge of what the vaccines are and how that can be brought forward to the healthcare side, especially, and then to the public for that awareness and greater acceptance. Okay, those just some examples there. Now let's focus on the infrastructure. You can see here it's chaired by Richard Ferris, the head of CTO, VP Engineering for Lend-Lease. And we also have Sala Eckhart, Microsoft, always very instrumental as well in terms of focusing on infrastructures and building themselves. And John Turner from GAFCON, who I understand is had spoke a couple months back in terms of that. So very, very strong in terms of the chairs and the co-chairs as part of this infrastructure group. It is one of the largest working groups that we have in terms of members, participation and adoption of this. And you can see the real focus. It's not just on smart buildings, but extending that into smart cities. And then it covers also from an infrastructure perspective, the road, the rail, the bridges, the tunnels, all of these different aspects. And then looking at it from autonomous systems in terms of transportation management and the flow of that and understanding that and how digital twins can be used throughout those different areas. Okay, next slide. But of course, there are challenges, and that's been very well recognized, and we're working to address those challenges through the membership, through collaborations and liaisons with other respective organizations. And you can see here in terms of the different areas, but again, where we're focused on is through the owners, the developers, the asset managers, the enablers of the digital twin technology and capabilities, and looking across this board and looking at solution providers and how can we work on that. We have several different pilot programs running within the consortium that are focused in different areas around these spaces, as well as working through our liaisons with several different smart city activities. Okay, next slide. And then our other vertical working group is around natural resources, and it's not just oil and gas, very important, mining and utilities, but also around energy and renewables, and using alternative resources to be able to generate electricity, and then from that standpoint, be able to generate green fuel, such as green hydrogen. So looking across that board and what is that impact relative to smart cities, relative to the overall economy, relative to climate, you know, all towards net zero, with a big conference coming up in Glasgow around that in November. Okay, next slide. And along those lines, as I was talking about those pilot programs, here you can see a couple different areas, what we're calling our technology showcases. And this is an example of a collaboration of several different members, as well as some liaisons, looking at a system of systems and understanding from the entire flow of the data from the sensors themselves, and then being able to understand how best to be able to analyze that information, construct that information, and then work that throughout with the digital twin actually being actively involved, active management. And another example of that is a pilot program that's running on looking at buildings and how can these buildings become batteries. Now, there's a lot of issues coming up where these buildings are carbon producers to an extent that they're going to be starting to see fines as a result of that. So what are the options in terms of making these buildings more energy efficient and more capable, and gets back into the sustainability, gets back into all aspects. So now again, with the digital twin and involved directly in terms of that active management and understanding those advantages and the values. Okay, next slide. And then we have several member initiatives going on where we have a digital marketplace that's coming out in terms of all the members and being able to identify their technology leadership, their thought leadership, capabilities, innovations, and services provided. We also, as I mentioned earlier, having the open source community coming out. So that's going to allow, as I said, non-members to submit their projects and have that evaluated and ensure that they are in alignment with the direction, the mission, the values, the goals, objectives of the Digital Twin Consortium in general. And then we also have the networking opportunities through the global networking. I already talked about some of the liaisons. We also have regional branch organizers around the globe that are actively involved in many different digital twins, several of them in terms of smart city initiatives and how that can play into the overall view from the consortium. Lots of opportunities for our members to be involved in that. And that's where we're coming out with this innovation platform program to be able to really showcase the value. What is that transformative business outcome that is being recognized? What you see before working without a digital twin, the value's great, okay, but what does that transformation come from in terms of impactful business outcomes when you bring the digital twin into play? So that's another program that we have, and we have a couple pilots around that as well. Okay, next.
I think that's it.
Excellent. All
Thank
right,
you
so
very
that I
much.
just want to give you an overview of the structure of the consortium and what's been going on, and certainly like to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure. Just a little bit on my, as more of a practitioner in the built environment industry, and having done my time on a number of standards bodies where you discuss for 30 minutes of a call where the apostrophe goes in Article 2, Section 7, Item 38 of a project for an ISO or ANSI standard. When I first was approached to join the Digital Twin Consortium, it was by Sala Eckert with Microsoft. And so I came in with a little trepidation because I said, okay, this is another standards body, so to speak. And it is largely in that it's consensus driven. But another thing, a lot of people, I believe, think when they see those founding members up there, the Dells and a lot of others, that those founding members are creating an organization to sell their products, and that Microsoft participates because they're here to sell use their platforms. That's the furthest thing from the truth. The reason Microsoft was a founding member, Sala heads she's the director of digital transformation for Microsoft real estate. So the reason they're engaged is they see what digital twin utilization and optimization can do for them as an organization. Same with Lend-Lease. So for me, I got engaged, I guess, maybe a month or 6 weeks after it got started. And I didn't realize, that it really had just gotten started. But we've done a lot as the organization very, very quickly as Dan and maybe Anto alluded, there are a lot of brilliant minds there. So, and one other thing that I've lived through that many of you may be familiar with is Bim washing. So we've all suffered for decades this brand new, great, save the world in the built environment technology of Bim that never really, to me, even became close to what its potential was, because everybody viewed it as a drawing platform, and they still do often. So again, digital twins was the next evolution. It doesn't replace BIM, but it encapsulates it. So anyway, I'll just stop there, but I have a lot of perspectives I'm happy to share, but I'm interested also in seeing what you folks, your questions you may have and your views.
Yeah, that was a great point, Steve. And from that member perspective, I mean, that's essential to understand that. So, absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Steve. So open it up to the group.
I can start. I'm a relative newbie to digital twin, so could each of you take a minute and talk a little bit about who you think the well, you touched on that already, but let's go back to question number 2, which was talk a little bit about the business models you see surrounding digital twin. How are companies making money or getting value out of this whole thing from a business standpoint?
Right.
That's a great question. You wanna go, Steve?
Well,
or you want
yeah, let's both, because Dan and I come from two different. I mean, that's why we're both on here. I mean, he's really from the organizational perspective and probably more technical than I am. So, but as I see it, one of the things I really got excited about at the Digital Twin Consortium was coming out of the built environment. I saw we had another vertical in aerospace and defense, and I've known for, again, decades, they've been utilizing this type of platform. and I'm not going to use the word technology because it's really about a practice as much as it is technologies. So that being the case, there's also a lot of segments, even in the built environment, that have been using, if you will, a type of almost digital twin. HVAC systems, there's a lot of those that are running a quasi digital twin and have been for decades. You know, a lot of the the other current sensor hubs are kind of a quasi digital twin. The thing that's kind of been missing though is looking at it more holistically from what I call the stakeholder, or the 3O is actually, I just wrote that in a thing over the weekend: owners, operators, and occupants. So those are the ones that have not really been I don't believe it's been understood that those are the real beneficiaries. And when I say owners, you know, it's the stakeholders, the owners of any performing, whether it's a city, whether it's a system, or whether it's a facility. Because a digital twin rolls up from a pump to a system to a building to a campus to a smart city. You know, it's not a digital twin, it's a mesh or a fabric of these. So
Steve, just to picking up on what Tracy said, this is Steve Fay. I'm still struggling to, you've said a couple times now that these other industries have been using digital twin for some time. And so what exactly, what are the examples of that when you say that? I mean, I understand if they're designing a product like a pump in CAD or some version of a CAD package, is that what you're referring to? Or
No.
what exactly are you saying is an example of digital twin?
Yeah, no, I think to give an example really specific that addresses that. Can you guys see my screen? I'm sharing the screen right now. Are you seeing a full screen or are you seeing a split screen?
Full screen.
Full screen.
Okay, great. So I'll Steve, go ahead. If you want to answer that, I'll give this by example because I think it really is key to this concept. So you want to see some examples, some representation. I actually have a deck that I call the value of the digital twin.
Mhm.
And this is one of the examples that I'm showing here. So here you can see, and I'll use it by the other industry, by mining, but there are obvious parallels as you'll see, and we'll bring those out. So here, this is an example of a system where the company came to, this is actually a member, XM Pro. They came to XM Pro and they said, look, we want to understand where our failures are going on, what's happening. So it came in as more of a condition monitoring, right? It was just, you tell us what's happening inside. There wasn't any digital twin aspect to begin with. And this company has gone through this before. And so they said, sure, let's start here. So it gets back to understand what is the objective here. The objective they wanted to do was understand where the failures were. Here you can see in these small screens here, you can see this is a mine that's 50 miles long underground. And you can see all these little red dots. You can see this path here. This path is a conveyor belt, and it's made up of a series of different, a number of conveyor belts. And you can see here the red, which were failures that they had. And they were identifying, look, we've had over the past year, we've had an extreme amount of unplanned downtime. So here you can see 184 hours. And what they're saying are preventable bore downtime identified with approximately 44,000 product tons. So this is a potash mine. So if we look at this, here in November 2019, when they came in, they started up and they instrumented and they said, okay, we'll tell you what's going on. That's all you wanted to know, condition monitoring. Here we go. So 31 downtime events, 184 downtime identified. So here you can see it. So between November 2019 to June 2020. Okay, you see all the red dots here. Those are ones where they have catastrophic failures. It stops and now they have issues, right? This is over that period. Here now at the end of the year, you can see, or at the end of the evaluation period, you can see here completely eliminated. These yellow dots, they said they know they have some problems, but they know they can address those. So what did they do? They actually went through, and here's that conveyor underground. They were able to identify not only here's what's happening, But they said, we can condition this. And so we're providing, again, the definition of a digital twin that Steve had put into the chat, right? A virtualization of a real world entity and or process with some synchronization mechanism, with some guaranteed twinning rate is what they call it. That's the frequency with the fidelity. They were able to identify that, and capturing the data in real time, they were able to see this. Predictive analytics, they executed these at 2-second intervals. And I forget how many, just a massive number of variables they were looking at. And you can think about that, 52 long conveyors in series. So the advantage the digital twin brought to them was being able to not only recognize that, but to predict in advance where that failure might occur. Whereas before, and I'll tell you, this is in Saskatchewan, so it's 50 miles underground. It takes at least 4 hours for them. And this is the time the guy arrives on site to get down and start to look and try and understand what's happening. And then 4 hours back. So there's time to roll the truck. There's cost to roll the truck. There's all the time down there. There's the unplanned downtime, which means no product is being brought out. In fact, this company actually owns a plant that uses that ore right away. So every hour that they aren't producing product, they're losing money. So walking in, figuring out exactly what was going on here, you can see 30% reduction in the downtime due to fluid coupling failures. They had this massive amount of revenue that they were losing. They went through that. They brought in the knowledge they understood based on what was happening. So the synchronization of the real world data, understanding what was going on, identifying that, avoiding all the unplanned downtime. So they were able to save roughly the $4 million per shift that they had per conveyor. They had 6 different lines, as you saw through there. So they transport that across the conveyors. Then they started thinking, well, wow, you solved that problem for me. Well, what about my other systems? I have bores, I have pumps, I have crushers, fans. In fact, that
So
overall.
Dan, if I could stop you for a minute, because I'm in terms of the data that they needed to identify why they had the failures, was that as a result of instrumenting the lines so they could see what was going on, or were they doing this virtually in a virtual environment to determine where the failure modes were occurring?
So they understood what was going on. They had to put sensors in there to figure out what it was. They actually put cameras underneath each one of the junction points there. They instrumented the gearboxes so they could analyze the temperature, the vibration. They had all of these key parameters that they knew they had to watch, right? They would have to tune these eventually, but with these sensors, they were able to key in these. And the other beauty to this is because of the flexibility that the digital twin provides, and it's a virtual dashboard, they were able to get this in front of their subject matter experts, the owners of the mine and the operators, and get that in front of the subject matter experts and said, yeah, we've been looking at this and going through our Excel sheets, this visualization, I understand. What if we add these other things or have these conditions? So that's the other advantage of the digital twin. It provides you that what if scenario.
There's
so
a key
they now
difference
transported
there.
this across this
Dan,
on every single mine. So now you're going from, in terms of savings of tens of millions, you're going into the hundreds of millions.
A key difference in a digital twin concept is, you mentioned about using CAD. There should never be a drawing. What is happening with the digital twin is it is any object, any building, any system is first completely operational in a virtualization, in a virtual world. It's not drawn. There are no drawings. We need drawings are built-in mistakes waiting to get reproduced, because a drawing requires interpretation. Interpretation is an opinion, and opinions are like a lot of things. Everybody has a different one. And so it's not just even the 3D aspect. When you, or that was one of the failures. A lot of people saw BIM as, you know, a glorified drawing. It's not about the visualization. That's just one convenient aspect of it. It's really about the functionality. And I said one of my exciting things was aerospace and defense, because, and you can go out, Google it, Rolls-Royce engine digital twin. They've been using, they actually lease on airplanes that you all have probably been on. It's running real time. They're downloading on a flight, a transcontinental flight or an over ocean flight, about 1 terabyte of data real time. And they're monitoring all just so many aspects of the systems, not just with sensors, but they're also able to maximize useful life of a lot of parts that they were replacing earlier. And actually through the sensors, they're able to determine failing points predictably. And the one example I use when I'm talking to folks in the built environment that's fairly easy to understand is it would be like an HVAC system that right now maintenance is you change the filter every 3 months, 30 days, 6 months, whatever it says. But in a digital twin environment, there's a sensor on each side of that filter in the air handler. And once a pressure differential hits a certain difference, and it knows that that's a 2-week build up to when it has to be changed to the pressure differential, it actually, the system orders that filter and creates a work order and has that set up to be done. That's the difference between a digital twin and just a model.
Can I just sort of ask this question? And Jerry just asked a question that I think is in the back of, I think, pretty much all of the faces on the screen, I can tell, is that in many ways, what is being described here is actually not a million miles away from what many people on the screen are doing today and have been doing for 10 or 20 years. Right, analyzing data, putting in lots of sensors, extracting it, and all that kind of stuff. Right. So we all know all of that stuff. There's nothing new there. The sort of the question is, why is digital twin, right, different from just the actual actions of analyzing and gathering the data? What is it that's different, or is this just a bigger scale, or is it more comprehensive? What is the difference?
For me, it's real time informing. So it's managing. It's not just collecting. It's able to shift systems, even people. In a large stadium, a digital twin can understand traffic flows, what capacities are, and do wayfinding of how to help people get out, as one example.
It's exactly that. It's the active management. It's effectively the situational awareness. It's the event intelligence. And I think to your point, Steve, also was describing how this, with the pandemic, I'll give you an instance. Pandemic, they normally would bring in 500 people and do a clean sweep of all the equipment because they knew they had been running it at max. They had maxed it all out. Well, guess what? Pandemic, they can't get to it. So what can they do? They can bring that virtualization. In fact, this was a member was talking to one of their customers, and he said, we bring that whole virtualization into your bedroom. And the guy started laughing. We said, why? He says, well, I'm going into my second bedroom to look at this dashboard and understand what's happening so I can work on that. So it is the event intelligence, the situational awareness, as Steve's pointing out, the real time, whatever you want to call real time data, and that visibility that it brings. I mean, I'll give you an example beyond an HVAC. Think about Tesla. Every single vehicle, every single Tesla has a digital twin out there before. And people think, okay, when Tesla comes around, they're coming on, they're going to take on the big three, Ford, GM, Chrysler. They're going to go after those guys. I used to work for Ford. I worked on electric vehicles. I worked on the dedicated processing system behind that. Everybody said, no, they're not going to take that on. They're not going to be able to do that. It wasn't about bringing on an electric vehicle. It was about the data. It was about being able to have that instant informational awareness of what's happening in the data. And that's actually spawned adjacencies for Tesla. It's been forecast $20 billion plus of revenue in this new insurance application they're doing. And what has enabled that? It's the digital twin that's enabled it. It's again that situational awareness, event intelligence that can now have micro transactions going automatically. You go from being able to turn your car in every 6 months and get the oil changed to more predictive, and then that predictive will lead to prescriptive.
Yeah.
And the digital twin is at the heart.
Dan, I guess the number of the people on the call, like Jim Lee and John Petsy and Anno, who are been doing data analytics now for a while. And a lot of it is, I appreciate it, is situational awareness and taking action based on it. So guys, are you hearing anything different, fundamentally different than what you're already doing?
Yeah, I'll jump in for a moment. I go back to that, the early definition that the Digital Twin Consortium puts out, or the IIC puts out. It's a digital representation of a physical environment. That's what forms the basis of analytics, right? You're getting all the digital information about a building, which can be analyzed. You know, how real time it is, it can vary, right? It can be up to the second, or it can be daily, right? That's a separate thing, the frequency, and that was pointed out in the definition, right? An agreed upon fidelity and frequency. And the ability to collect, store the data, and to deliver it to higher level applications. I mean, that to me is the digital twin. I think part of the confusion that we see and we're trying to demystify this month is, in the buildings industry, digital twin has come to be associated with a 3D picture of the building with that sensor data on it. And I think, Steve's definitely saying that's just one thing you might get out of a digital twin. The digital twin is the data layer that serves all of that. And I think what we're seeing is, maybe in our industry, we have had to build a digital twin to get to our end goal, but it seems like there's a new layer of industry, companies, standards organizations trying to focus on the digital twin layer, the data layer. That's my thought.
There's another aspect, that another maturity on top of that, and that is AI and machine learning. So we don't have to have these offline analysts and after the fact, and next time let's do it better. It's actually managing better at real time. And you pointed out a key to one of the first things that I was really excited that we did at the consortium is that we created, and I was part of that team, when we created a one-sentence definition. And we knew it was going to create some problems, but if we worded it right, we could build all kinds of other things to point to what that definition was, but it's a bumper sticker, and that's what we wanted. And you pointed out the key entities of it just then, John. It's synchronized. That's one of the big differences, and allows, this machine learning and AI and even us without having to intervene to better
And that's
manage.
what gets you to the point of that prescriptive, right? You go from the predictive to the prescriptive. And on top of that, from a supply chain management, there's the other piece of this is the holistic view that you're able to get and be able to process this amount of information, this velocity and volume of data. I think you were talking about the jet engine, right? A car is 2 terabytes, I think. So it's a massive amount of information. It's information overload where the traditional methods do not allow you to accommodate that and to be able to give you that actionable insight and what to do and have that move forward into that prescriptive with the AI and the ML and the other enabling technologies.
So, Jim,
So Dan, I'm sorry. I was going to say.
I was going to ask you to chime in. Go ahead.
Good. Okay. Thank you, Anto. Dan, we in this industry, like many others, we've been working on this problem for 20 years. There are 50 companies in the industry that have been working on value propositions very similar to the value propositions you showed with mining. They already operate at huge scale. The value propositions you talked about are things we already address. What I think would be very interesting for the group is to see on a basis of actually looking across verticals, how can the digital twin help bring additional value that is not already being harvested in a vertical by vertical basis?
And you're talking about verticals within the building, within the life cycle of the building?
No, not within the building, but things that are beyond the building, for perhaps buildings to manufacturing, buildings to infrastructure. Where do you, well, maybe you could be broad in your answer to that.
Well, the buildings, the infrastructure, that is what, to me, the smart cities is. Another organization I'm part of is a nonprofit called the Aec Hackathons. And we've had these events all over the world. And the whole point when we started that 7 years ago was to bring together these amazing game developers and technology geeks with people out of the built environment, job site superintendents, architects, engineers, to really create tools. And we, a few years ago, we were hosted by the city of Austin. The mayor gave us City Hall for our event for the weekend. And that was really a seminal moment for me, because I understood then that what she was looking for, the mayor's office, what they were looking for, they wanted to develop a plug and play where a design, a digital, it wasn't really called then a digital twin, but seriously, the BIM model, they would be able to plug in elements of that to their city grid and creating the smart cities, and even in planning, understand in advance before they even approve that facility, how it was going to impact traffic flow, how it was going to impact trash collection, how it was going to impact people flow and public transportation and all kinds of aspects of it. So I don't know if that helps or answers the question, but that's across one of them. Even across manufacturing, even just this past week, we kind of identified that, wow, we need to be working closer with the manufacturing group at the consortium as infrastructure I'm talking about. But as I also, as Dan was going through the slides, one thing that I've seen is the natural resources of mining, that's where all the materials are coming from that go into manufacturing, that come into the facilities. And that gives us, this digitalization gives us a transparency, a capability. The walls that we got to work to break down are the interoperability aspects. And how do we?
Right. Well, we have been working on those. John Petsy, for instance, with Haystack, has been working on interoperability things for a decade. But the key thing that I'd like to circle back to is Tracy's original point, which is, how do we bring new value propositions? How do we harvest? So there's a lot of technology, just as the aerospace guys and the manufacturing guys, this is mature stuff. There are people out there in all these industries doing something. The question is what are the value propositions that we can harvest as an industry by these synergies? That one of the problems I have with smart cities, we've talked about them for years. We had a whole segment on this show. And the real problem is that smart cities don't really have any money. So it's even though people want these things, it's in reality, it's very hard to turn them into businesses. So, what I'm looking for is where are those, really interesting synergies between the silos where there's actually an opportunity to make money, push this technology forward.
I think the majority of that.
You're muted, Dan. Now you're really muted.
Yeah.
All right, how about now? Am I really
There
muted?
you go.
Much better.
Great.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. So another area, I think to your point, bringing in the value propositions with, again, some of these new technologies and capabilities from a smart city planning. And this is actually one of our members is the chair of an institute called the Autonomy Institute. And what they are looking at is how can they establish transportation corridors in an existing smart city? And what are the ways that we can bring the communication and the data, this tremendous amount of data throughout these different areas, in terms of both what's running on the roads, what's running in the air, what's running at the ports, what's all of these, bring them all together. And they actually have these massive, I forget what they called it, it's almost like a mission control, where you have just tons and tons of different screens that are showing all that information in real time, what's happening for coordination and alignment. Again, I understand from an analytics point and having all the different views and looking at that, absolutely, but you wouldn't be able to handle that from an overall city perspective and all the buildings and what's happening in each of those on a given immediate instant. So for first responders, there's actually a pilot program running up in Canada on first response and being able to look at that and how can identify either whether it's a COVID situation or something, a gunfire situation, being able to detect a muzzle flash. It's that real time and being able to get that response, but to assimilate that massive, again, the velocity, the volume of data that's coming out in those different areas.
Oh, sorry, Dan, go ahead. Sorry.
So I think that bring it back to the smart buildings or building on this side. We had actually had a potential member call this morning, and it was a team of about 8 different people that were their VDC organization. And they were saying, we're being asked by our CTO to take a look at this and understand digital twins. We have, just like you're saying, we've got a precursor of that digital twin. We've been doing the modeling, we've been doing the analytics, but we're trying to get to that point where we can understand how best to implement this. And one of the points they said was, once we have this, we can now bring this together and not have to reinvent the wheel every time for every single different scenario that we run against. And how can we easily modify that in terms of this concept of a composable digital twin? So that's going to bring in these new value opportunities and value propositions, being able to be very reactive very quickly based on the different scenarios or the different opportunities that are coming forward. So from the bidding process all the way through the different efficiencies that could be recognized through there, being able to have not only that visualization, but have those examples where you can say, yes, we've done this in the past. Here's how we can take this based on this. Let me show you. And let's do just a projection right in front of you right now, how this would represent it. Here's the data that's going on in real time. I'll bring it up and you can watch this and see in real time. And now we can modify that and run those what if scenarios.
So I have a question, two questions. So one is, do you, both Steve and Dan, do you feel there is a limit in the built environment for digital twins on the size of a building or a portfolio? For example, I don't see this working for a small to medium-sized building. I think the cost will be prohibited. So do you guys, one, see, is there a segment within the built environment of a certain size, number one? Number two is, the other challenge is, again, we can connect, we can get the data, we can integrate, we can do all of this stuff today. We all, everybody on this listening on this call knows that. Is the knowledge base at the building owner, or who can interpret the digital twin information to make some good judgment calls and actually do something with the information you're given? That's where I see a challenge in the built environment.
Well, on the building size, you're by stating that it's too expensive, that tells me, and this is what's typically done today in the vast majority, it's an afterthought. It's an after the fact. So most digital twinning, you will, it's, oh, the building's done, and now we're going to go in with duct tape and glue and stick a bunch of sensors on existing systems and try to start monitoring this stuff. As I was saying earlier, we're not going to be drawing, we're not going to be designing, we're going to be actually constructing virtually and digitally that facility. And I don't care if it's a Starbucks or if it's a house or if it's the new Los Angeles Raiders stadium, which it actually was constructed digitally first. That digital virtualization is what's going to be driving. Dan mentioned a word that just drives me crazy: bidding. Bidding is who is making the biggest mistake. That's going to be gone. It's going to be configured and defined. Estimating, gone. We have cost definition because we have everything there. So that's what makes this start to be valuable. The real extraction, the real value is to the owner. As I said, the 3 O's, owner, operator, occupant. That's who is really going to see the biggest dollars. How we deliver those dollars, there's a lot of opportunities for a lot of people to make a lot of money in that, in these systems.
So what you just said, so what you said, I'm hearing what you said, and I agree with you about the owners. But so are you now saying it's only good in a new construction? What about the millions and billions of square feet in retrofit?
I love your question, because that is where it's more important. So, and I've talked about it even with BIM. How do we digitalize? You know, most things are renovations. I worked with the APPA, American Physical Plant, the facility managers for all North American universities, on creating a total cost of ownership ANSI standard. And these guys are dealing with buildings that are 50 years old. And we have what I call bridge methods. We have ways, for instance, I'll just use it. Matterport scanning is one way we can go out and harvest. How do we harvest digitally? We can digitally harvest. Laser scanning. There's a lot of ways we can harvest these now, especially when they're getting ready to start a renovation or a repurpose of the facility. That's a perfect time to start that. And then is it a absolutely full functioning digital twin of every system like it would be in a new build? Probably not, but that's how we bring the whole built environment into this type of functional advantage.
what's happening in some of the pilot programs where they're actually going in and they're scanning, they're understanding, because the blueprints or the documentation that there is old, it's obsolete, it's never been updated. Now you'll have an immediate record to be able to do that, and you can then associate that with any of the data and the control, like Steve had been talking about with the HVAC, and look at ways to optimize and improve the performance in those different areas.
So we're past the top of the hour. Maybe we can start to bring this to conclusion.
Great questions, though. Great discussion. So thank you. And
any sort of anybody have a sort of concluding question?
Is somebody willing to pay for all of this?
There you go. It's a good question. Who pays?
Yeah, the owner. Lend-Lease is one of the largest building owner operators on the planet. That's why they're here. They see it. But it's going to take not disruption. We've been disrupting the built environment for 40 years, and we think emailing a PDF of a drawing is disruption. It's going to take replacing complete workflow silos. It's going to be completely replacing primarily AEC. It's going to cease to exist in 10 years, as we know. I think 5 years. It'll still always be here. We're still using blacksmiths to make some things, but if we had a 28-story building and we need door hinges, we don't call a blacksmith.
Dan, you want to close with your comment on the economics?
I think we're seeing, let's say, more creative ways of being able to bring those to light. One example is, some of these older buildings are going to be facing pretty hefty fines in terms of the carbon footprint and what they've been doing, and being able to go into those and talk about, well, here's some advantages we can provide. Here's where we can work to figure out where you are overproducing or over in terms of your existing carbon footprint, and what are some of the optimizations, what are some of the efficiencies that can be brought to play. And by the way, with those, we can also bring in other areas, and that's a couple of the different programs that they're looking at right now. They have the attention of these owners of the buildings because they see a way that they can actually have the cost concerns at least mitigated or minimized. So there are different ways. It is a collective. It does involve whether it's the state or the government, to be able to involve and bring that all together. They have to look at those different aspects. There's something going on right now in the city of Austin around the autonomy, and it's involving all three of those different bodies.
Okay, well, this has been a great conversation. I think this is going to be a good month, the next 3 weeks. So thank you, Dan and Steve, for joining us today. Appreciated your
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
And
Thanks very much.
Yeah, so with that, we'll put a video of this up on YouTube by tomorrow, and we will be back next Monday to continue this discussion on digital twin. So with that, thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Have a great week.
Guys.
Guys,
Bye.
thank you.
Steve, guys.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.